Today's guest is Andy Hill from Marriage, Kids, and Money. He is debt-free, mortgage-free, with a stay-at-home wife at 36 years old. Let's learn his story and how he was able to achieve this amazing accomplishment. Welcome to Richer Soul, Life Beyond Money, the last baby step. Imagine it's 12 months from now. You've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? What's it like to have great relationships, friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money? To be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures. Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time. Your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. I help people live the life of their dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. You can learn how by listening to the framework in episodes 1 through 9. It's simpler than you can imagine. You can also hear actual coaching calls by looking under the coaching call tab on richersoul.com. You'll also find all the show notes for this episode there, and there's a link in this episode. I send out a monthly email, and you can sign up while you're there. In the monthly email, I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. I also share the most interesting articles I read on Facebook at facebook.com/richersoul. The podcast keeps growing, and I want to say welcome to all of our new listeners. Always love to hear questions and feedback on how the show is going, so please don't hesitate to email me. I read all the emails. It's rocky@richersoul.com. Everyone wants to know how to get rich. It's actually not that hard. Step 1, spend a lot less than you earn. The wider the gap between what you earn and what you spend, the faster you become wealthy. Step 2, increase your income, but be mindful of the time it involves. We have to be careful with trading too much time for money. We only have so much time, but yes, there is an abundance of money out there. Step 3, invest wisely and allow the wealth to compound. While this is a guaranteed plan that works, so few people actually implement it. It's part of the theme that life is simple but hard. Having the patience to allow the money to make you rich seems to go against the idea of getting rich quickly, which usually is followed by getting poor quickly, as the wealth disappears just as fast as it came. But when you build it slowly, it tends to last forever. Today, I want to focus on relationships, especially relationships with your immediate family. I'm going to speak directly to the dads, because I've noticed so many dads are so tied up in work, they are uninvolved at home with the kids and what's going on. This is a recipe for disaster on a multitude of levels. I remember a VP from a company I used to work for a long time ago. He was probably in his mid to late 50s, and they gently retired him. He talked about how he was now going to be able to spend time with his wife and kids. Mind you, the kids were already married. They weren't young anymore. I don't know how it turned out, but I bet that a long time ago, they had moved on from a relationship with him. They had their own lives to lead, and they were doing something different. No one really remembered him much after he left. I felt sad for the choices he made. You can't raise boys to be men and girls to be women who are strong and grounded if you're not involved in leading the way and showing them how. So I urge the dads out there especially to pick up the charge and lead your families. You need to be intentional with your wife and kids and lead them by example. Today, we're going to meet another dad who embodies his philosophy. I'm excited about today's conversation with Andy as we go beyond the money and towards creating a life of balance filled with gratitude. There's a lot of gems in this episode to help you create your best life. Andy Hill is the host of Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, focused on helping families build legacy wealth. The podcast was nominated as the Best New Personal Finance Podcast by Plutus in 2017. Outside of writing for his own weekly blog of the same name, his personal finance-focused articles have been featured in Stan Magazine, Business Insider, Quick and Zing blog, NerdWallet, and Rockstar Finance. When he's not talking money, Andy enjoys wrestling with his 2 kids and singing 80s karaoke music with his wife. Let's meet Andy. Welcome to Richer Soul, Andy. It's great to have you join us today.
I'm really happy to be here, Rocky.
Well, thanks for the honor. So, we always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I'd say school was probably not very much, but my parents were a really good influence on me. My mother was a very good saver, a savvy shopper, and she kind of influenced me in that way. So I remember at a young age getting my first savings account, going to the bank with her. I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. So she helped me to open up that savings account, get an understanding of, if I'm able to do chores around the house, it'll help me to earn a little bit of money. And when you have some, have fun with it. And then when you have a little bit more, put it in the savings account because you never know what you're going to want later on in life. So that savings mindset definitely came from my mother. And then I would say my father has always been a really good earner throughout his life. He had a really good career at Volkswagen of America, Audi of America for about 35 years and grew himself from a very low position in the company all the way to a C-level executive by the time he retired. And I saw that hard work, and he instilled that in me as well, on what it takes to provide value and then get paid for that value. So a lot of those lessons came from my parents, my mother on the savings side and then my father on the earning side. So I've tried to utilize a lot of those lessons in my life thus far.
It sounds then that they were quite intentional then in doing that.
Absolutely. I think, as I've heard you talk on your show in the past, as parents, we can only talk so much about what our kids should do. It's really walking the talk or demonstrating it. And I think my parents did that quite well.
That's awesome. So what are you doing to teach your kids about money?
Well, that's a good segue because now I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. So we've started a similar program that my mom had for me, a chore and reward system, mostly for my daughter, Zoe. My son, Calvin, listens and nods his head and says, "Yes, Dad, I'll put the money in the jar." But I don't think he really comprehends exactly what we're asking him to do quite yet. But Zoe gets an understanding of when she works around the house and contributes that she will be monetarily rewarded as well as emotionally rewarded from hugs and kisses from her father. And it's starting to make a difference. We've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. Every Saturday morning, she's got a list of a few chores that she needs to accomplish that I do alongside with her. So for example, we'll do the laundry. She'll bring down her laundry and then I'll help her load it in the washer and then she'll move it over to the dryer. And each of these little chores, these small chores, earn her $1. And with that money, she gets to put it into 3 separate jars. One is spend, one is save, and one is give. And we've been going along this journey together about what those 3 jars mean and how she can utilize them. Giving is something that I've been working on personally. So it's been fun to work on that with my daughter at the same time, because these opportunities where her give jar gets filled up, we then have the opportunity to decide what we want to do with that money. And it's been a self-reflective moment for me because I don't think I've been the best giver in my past 10 years. And it's given me an opportunity to have a little bit of self-reflection and make some positive changes in my life as well. So not only are my kids hopefully going to be learning how to handle money in the right way, I think I'm learning along with them.
And that's awesome. When you can learn side by side, I think they gain more respect for you because they see that you're constantly trying to improve yourself and working through the struggles and figuring it out. And then you have the conversations back and forth, and that creates for a great relationship with your children.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you it works. I've heard this type of saving system or teaching system from a lot of people across the board, it does work. Everyone's got their little nuances to how they do it, but I think the basic premise is there. You've kind of added in the work part of it, which I think is important, because as I'm looking back and as I'm looking around, I think one of the most difficult things is to teach kids grit and to do the work. And I think that's one of the skills that's missing a lot. It sounds like by doing what you're doing, you're teaching them that.
Absolutely. I'm doing my best.
And that's all you can do, right? You do your best. You walk the walk. As long as your walk matches your talk, then it works out. Mistakes happen. That's okay. And you just have to go back and, again, have the conversation. And that's a whole nother thing they're learning, is that sometimes mistakes and failures happen, and this is how you handle them. Because I think a lot of people don't handle them well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that open communication with your children is huge. It not only provides them with an opportunity to understand better, but also respect. You know, when you're able to speak to them in the way that you want them to speak to you in the future, you know, as adults, I think that's just preparing them for being good little humans.
It is, and it works. And it's funny because I was thinking about this today. I was thinking about the interview. I'm like, my kids are teenagers now. I kind of forget what it was like when they were young. And it's good to kind of chat with someone to remind me of what that is, because a lot of the listeners, I think, also have much younger kids. But one of the things I noticed, like when our kids were little, we actually took our family room and moved our family room into our basement. And so that became the adult family room. Like if you wanted to watch TV or watch a movie or do something, the adults went downstairs. And that created, the family room became the kids' room. And it created that open play space that our kitchen and our family room are all one big space. So we're just all together in the same room. Everyone's together. What I noticed a lot was a lot of other parents kind of shun the kids to the basement. And it creates a separation. It's almost like you're a second-class citizen, go downstairs and be quiet. And you don't know what they're doing. So how do you have conversations? How do they see how life goes? And I think it's one thing that I don't have any regrets doing.
That's a great way to live. I mean, they're a part of your family. The more time you spend with them, the more of the values that you're trying to teach will probably be absorbed.
Absolutely. And now that I'm at kind of the end of that game, I see that it has paid off.
That's great. How old are your kids?
My daughter is 18. She's about to go off to college. And my son, he's 15, but he just finished his sophomore year in high school. So he is young for his grade.
That's great.
She went on an alternative program. She kind of laid out a new path for the end of her high school. What we've learned from her in college and the game, we have dramatically shifted what we've done with my son. So we've pulled him out of school at the end of this year. And he's going to spend the next 2 years in a community college, just earning all the credits he needs, which will finish out his high school diploma and give him a 2-year head start on his engineering degree.
Wow, so that's incredible.
That will dramatically cut college costs, because the community college, I think, is $100 a credit. Mm-hmm. We can also send them, there's another local private college that's $150 a credit. And then there is a state university here, Penn State, and I have to check. They're a little bit more expensive, but they have the engineering classes, and they're local, so he can drive once he hits his senior year and start taking all those classes early. And the whole idea is that he doesn't have to spend anywhere near what he would have had to otherwise going for his degree.
Wow.
It's also to get it as cheap as possible, because I've visited all these different campuses. I've talked to a lot of people. And yes, there is a certain thing to an Ivy League school, but it's not all that. There are other ways. There are cheaper ways. And for me, it's about just get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And how is he able to go into community college at 15 or 16? Is he able to test into that, or are you able to start community college that early? I've just never heard of that before.
You can start college whenever you want. There's a ton of dual enrollment programs, which is basically designed for high school students. Some have limits, like you can only take 8 credits a semester. The community college has programs with a lot of the high schools. The kids can take both classes. So most kids will do a couple classes, but he's already taken college classes prior to this. We've always pushed him forward, and he's always gone forward. So he's already taken college calc. So we know he can handle it. And they're open to it, and more colleges, and community colleges especially, are open to this. So it's literally like he filled out a thing on the computer, and a week later there's a letter, okay, you're in, take your tests, and we'll move on from here. And they have a good system, at least in the state of Pennsylvania. The community college credits automatically transfer into the upper state universities.
That's incredible.
From that standpoint, it works out well. I mean, it's not like you get to go to college where you want to, but at the same point, if we're going to save $150,000 or more, guess what? Go party somewhere else instead of wasting it there.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense.
That it does. So you have some claims to fame. I think you are 36 years old, correct?
That's right. Yeah, 36.
Debt-free?
Yes. Now we are completely debt-free.
And completely debt-free means no mortgage.
That's right. Yeah, just as of last fall, we clobbered that one off the books.
How do you do that at age 36?
Well, I would say a couple things. Intentionality, and then a really strong partnership with your wife. We'd gotten married in 2010, and when we got together, both of us didn't really know a lot about money, about managing money. We knew how to earn it pretty well. We were both combined making about a six-figure salary. Outside of that, we didn't really know much about money. We knew how to spend it and didn't know how to manage it very well. We had about a negative $50,000 net worth, and we didn't even know what net worth meant until we were sitting in front of the Susie Orman show, watching her give people grades about their financial life. And then we kept on hearing the term net worth over and over again. So we decided to figure out what ours was. And even though we were making six figures combined, we were, I guess, essentially broke with negative $50,000 net worth and about $60,000 in debt. So we had a little aha moment at that point, and we decided to try to pay off our debt, our consumer debt, before our kids came into the world. That was our goal. And sort of the driving force for that, I was sort of always a numbers guy, as I mentioned, even being a young guy trying to save my money. But for my wife, it was more of an emotional request. She had a desire when we had those kids to raise them and stay at home with them. And through some conversations that we had and some number crunching that we did, we found out if we were able to pay off all of our consumer debt, we would have the ability for Nicole to go part-time when our first child came into the world. So that became our driving force. And then over the next 12 months, we paid that one completely off. So we had about $50,000 or $60,000 of debt we paid off in about a year. We had no kids at the time. We just buckled down a little bit more, and we're intentional about our spending. We got together once a month for our monthly budget party that we got together and just talk about our spending, where it's going and how it's going there. And we eventually paid that off. And then once that was paid off, we got a little excited about, well, could we keep the same intensity and the same savings rate and not have a mortgage? So first thing we did, though, when we were expecting our second child, is that we were looking for a new house. And when I say we, I mean my wife was looking for a new house because she wanted to have a little bit more space than my 1,000-square-foot bungalow that I moved into when I was getting out of college. So she found a great house. And then I loved the house too, but our agreement, I said, hey, we'll get the house as long as we can pay the mortgage off in 5 years. And that was our agreement when we got the house. And we kept the same intentionality and same budget meetings that we'd been doing for the past couple of years every month, kept our savings rate high, and we were able to pay off that mortgage in just under 4 years. So we are now completely debt-free at 36 years old and really excited about the next steps coming up.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so that brings up the question. I think a lot of couples have struggles talking about money together. Were there ever struggles in the conversation, or do you guys just click? And do you have advice for couples on how to have those conversations?
Yeah, when I wrap up our story, our 7-year story, in about 3 minutes, it sounds really cheery. But yeah, no, there's lots of opportunities for us to have disagreements and try to find middle ground. And that happened a lot over those 7 years. I would say, some of the things that I've learned over that time frame is that there's no one way to communicate with somebody. Even at the first portion of my marriage when I thought I knew everything about my wife. It's a constant learning opportunity as a married couple to discover what makes someone tick, what makes them excited. And then the important part is trying to speak to that person in that language, getting them excited about things that might be difficult, but trying to do it in a way that they'll come on board. So I use the example of paying off our debt with the end goal of her being able to stay at home with the kids. And we were able to do that when Calvin came around. So she went part-time with Zoe and then full-time when Calvin came around. The past 3.5 years, she's been able to have such an incredible bond with our kids that I think it's something that she's going to cherish for the rest of her life. But now she's gotten to that point where she's kind of thinking, all right, now I'd like to use my adult brain a little bit and stop talking with my children and speak to some adults. So she started to jump back in a little bit and do some part-time work, which is great. 10 to 20 hours a week. She's helping to work as a professional organizer. So she goes into people's homes and helps them to create some order and almost like this little minimalism touch that's going on. So she's been able to go through these series of events in her life of being a stay-at-home mom and now pursuing a career, but still have the time with her kids. And we've been able to do all those nice things because of the partnership that we developed together and the communication that we had. So I guess advice for people who are out there that are trying to have some of that partnership together, I would say the first thing and the only thing that rises to my brain right now is just trying to speak in terms that the person will really get excited about and seeing what makes them tick. Thinking about what their big goals are in life, whether they're financial or just personal or emotional or family related, and then speaking in terms of how working together on your finances or working together on any goals can help you to get there. So it's just, I think it's all about how you speak to your spouse.
And so there's a lot behind that in the sense that first, you're actually thinking about goals and desires and dreams. And two, it sounds like when you're talking to your spouse, you're not talking in your language. You're actually listening to what she's saying and responding in her language. And I think a lot of couples don't do that. They're both on their agenda and their dreams, or they think they know what the spouse's dream is, but they have no idea and they've had no conversation about it. And that's a shame. And it sounds like when you do have the conversations, when you do understand each other and understand what each other wants, it's much easier for you to get what you want because you're both able to achieve what you want together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's having those open conversations. And especially when you have got small kids, and I Rocky, you've got the 18-year-old and the 15-year-old now, but if you could remember back to when they were 6 and 3 and they didn't really let you speak to each other very much, making that set aside time to have those conversations can be difficult, but so important, especially when you're in those situations where you're not able to have a lot of free time to express your feelings or speak. And we get them whenever we can. So late in the evening or early in the morning, we are setting aside time to have these conversations, and they are so important for us to have. And to your point, it's very important to see things from the other person's perspective. There's always going to be disagreements, and we're human, but as much as we can do to step back and try to empathize with where your spouse is and their desires and their feelings at the moment, it's so important, especially for marriage, because this is, this isn't just a quick exercise. This is a lifelong partnership. So having the ability to have those conversations and partner together is just so important.
And it's cool. And you're intentional about setting aside the time to do this. And because I always tell people 0 to 5 for kids is probably the most difficult age because that's when they're just sucking everything out of you. You have no life. You can't go anywhere. There's no nice restaurants. And I remember that. And it gets better. Like 6 to 12 is the next stage. And it's a lot of fun in that 6 to 12 stage. And then you hit the 12 to 18 stage. And that's a whole different stage. And each of these stages have different activities and different needs. And you've got to also change with the stages and change how you treat your kids, because they're going to continually change. But when you're intentional, which it sounds like you've been, and you've done that, you have success, which is really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. And yeah, to your point, I don't want to rush through this stage because I love the moments where I get to lay next to my children before they go to bed and read them stories and have my son want to hug me as much as he does. And then as they get older, I know that there's probably a little bit more separation, a little bit more independence. So I'm really enjoying this stage right now for the bonding and the love aspect of it. But yeah, it would be really great if I could just have a conversation with my wife sometimes.
And believe it or not, that doesn't necessarily have to change with the kids. My son still hugs me. He doesn't have any trouble doing that in public. Like even now, in the mornings for school, I crawl into bed to wake him up, and he is 15. So I think a lot of that has to do with whether or not your kids respect you. Sure. And that comes back to the same thing as your wife. You know, do you respect them? That's what's going to build their respect for you. Unfortunately, too often, especially when you're running on the hamster wheel, it's too many of those small little cuts and too many of those ignoring them and not listening to their needs, or just assuming their needs and telling them what you think they need instead of having the conversation.
Do you think a lot of your intentional presence in their lives over the past, 18 to 15 years, based on your entrepreneurial ventures, have helped you grow that bond that you have with your daughter and your son?
Absolutely. Because I know all the kids in their class. So we can have conversations. All right, who is so-and-so? What did so-and-so do? And I know who they are. I've gone on all the class trips. I've coached through soccer and through Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and all these different activities. So we can have conversations in their world, not in my world. And they're meaningful in their world. And we can talk about behaviors and kids in their world and how to deal with the struggles. So since I'm there, that's possible. If I wasn't there, I couldn't relate and I couldn't see. And I'm looking at it with one lens. They're looking at it from another lens. And so it's kind of the two lenses explaining each other's side and helping them navigate how to grow and how to deal with their situations and how to overcome all the things kids have to deal with. I think too often we just ignore their problems. For boys especially, it's like, buck it up, be a man. And for girls, it's like, stop whining about that. And every time you do that, you're creating a cut with your kid. But if you can have real conversations, and if they're willing to continue to have conversations with you, and I've had conversations continually all the way through, even now we still have conversations. So yes, absolutely. I think the biggest things you can do when they are young is make them feel safe and make them feel loved. The stuff doesn't matter. Those two things, and you keep doing that, you treat them like you treat your wife, which is to have conversations, listen in their words and talk in their needs, then absolutely. You'll have great relationships all the way through. And, teenagers are teenagers, but it's actually been a wonderful run through teenagerhood.
That's incredible. I love hearing that.
Just be intentional. So I guess that's a question for you. Do you have goals and intentions for your kids?
For my kids, I think, as you talked about earlier, the ability for us as parents to demonstrate what a good person is or good actions are. I think by setting goals for myself personally about the man that I want to be, the husband that I want to be, the father that I want to be, I'm hoping that improvement will rub off on my children, and they'll see that they'll see when you are really excited about something and you put a lot of effort into it and you want to see it be a success, and it is, that it pays off. So I'm hoping that my personal goals will rub off for those kids. As far as their personal goals, I guess I don't really have personal goals for them. I just want them to do their best in school and do their best in our community and having the opportunity to be involved and make friends and grow. And I've had the opportunity to be there alongside them, like you're saying, how important that is in their schools and in their extracurricular activities. So I do my best to try to model good behavior in front of them when we're doing those things, and then have good communication with them when they're having opportunities for learning. So yeah, I guess I don't really have specific goals for them, but I think if I'm able to be a good model based on my goals, that I think that will help them in the long run.
That's cool. One of the things that they talk about with adults is you are the average of the 5 people you're around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true of kids too. So be careful of 5 people your kids are around.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely.
So that means picking the environments they're in, and depending on what your school system's like and what the opportunities are and what's out there, sometimes you don't have as much freedom to do that as you might choose to. And looking
That's a really good point.
Alternatives to how you pick who they're around.
That's a good point. Yeah, we've been really blessed to be in a great school system, and a lot of the friends that Zoe's chosen or to focus spending time around, we've really enjoyed them, as well as meeting with their parents and some of the activities that she's decided to pursue. We've been really pleased with everybody that she's come across. And if there are people that we don't feel like we want to spend time around, we do that with respect, but it's also something that we have some good communication with Zoe around as well.
That just kind of reminds me that not only did I know all the kids, but I knew all the kids' parents.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, at some point or another, most of those parents were at our house, so we got to know them as people. And this way, you're kind of at least doing your best to shape that system. Recently, I read Mindset by Carol Dweck. I don't know if you've read that book.
No, I haven't.
So Mindset's about growth mindsets and fixed mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's doing this from a adult perspective, psychological, but as you read it, she's actually referring back to the way parents talk to kids and whether or not the parents are creating growth mindsets or fixed mindsets. It has to do a lot with praise and how we talk to kids and how we look at success and failure. It's funny because the last couple books I've read, it was that one, and the other one was, I think it's The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And that's about psychology and all these adults who are messed up and how he's dealing with them. And all of the roots of their issues are childhood. So it's interesting reading the books and going, oh, these aren't parenting books, but really they're parenting books. And they're much more in depth than most of the parenting books I read when my kids were young.
And the difference between growth and fixed mindset is what?
A kid who's got a fixed mindset is afraid to kind of learn. So it's like, hey, you're so smart, you did well on that math test. So you think you're praising them. Well, now the kid's like, oh, I'm so smart. Well, I don't want to not be smart, so I'm not going to try and push the edges. Because I want to stay smart. And if I try and push the edges, I might fail. And if I fail, I'm not smart. And if I'm not smart, then my dad doesn't love me. Right? And so if you go back and say, wow, you really worked hard on learning that, and the result was a good test result, you did a great job at putting in the effort to learn. Now you're teaching them to put in the effort to learn, not the result of the test, and putting that fear kind of mindset into them, which actually turns into a fixed mindset.
That's interesting. You'll have to definitely check out that book.
And so those are the things I learned later. I think accidentally we did okay with that one.
Isn't that all we try to do, right? If we did okay, then I think we're good.
Yeah, if we did okay, then that's good enough. I know that you talk about the Dave Ramsey baby steps and kind of expanding on them. And I don't think I've ever talked about what the 7 baby steps are on this podcast. And so I'm going to go through them really quick. These are Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps. Step 1 is to put $1,000 in a beginner emergency fund. Step 2 is to pay off all debt using the debt snowball. And the debt snowball basically means you pay your smallest debt first. The reason you do that is because you have success quickly. And then you keep paying your bigger debts by rolling the amounts that you're paying each month until all your debt's gone. And then step 3 is 3 to 6 months of expenses into a savings fund as a full emergency fund. Step 4 is to invest 15% of your household income into Roth IRAs and tax-favored retirement accounts. Honestly, I know people talk about 10 and 15%. 10 and 15% are not going to get you to early retirement. They're not going to get you as far as you need to go. Step 5 is begin college funding for your kids. And I kind of get that. We didn't really save money for our kids for college because I was always the attitude, if you're smart enough to go to college, you're smart enough to figure it out. And I knew we'd have money somewhere that I wouldn't have to worry about it. Like when you pay off your mortgage, right? You can pay for college, just cash flow it.
Right.
Step 6 is to pay off your home early, which you've done. And step 7 is to build wealth and give. And that's kind of vague.
It is.
So you came up with steps 8, 9, and 10. Would you mind sharing those with us?
Yeah, sure. And the purpose of coming up with those is that, we got to that point, or we were about to get to that point of paying off the mortgage. And then I was asking myself, now what? Now what do we do? Because I like steps. I'm a very goal-oriented person. So if there's a 1 through 10, then I will take it on as a challenge. So I decided, after reading a lot of other great books and interviewing some folks on the podcast and reading some great blogs, that there's a lot of great information out there that could extend these baby steps. So I invented some fake ones here. I don't think I want to get sued by the Lampo group. They're definitely, we'll call them the Bebe steps, so we're not getting in trouble. So baby step number 8 I put on here was max out your tax-favored retirement accounts. So as you said, that 10 to 15%, and step 4 isn't probably going to get you to build the big wealth, and it's not really allowing you to take advantage of the tax advantages that could be really utilized through a 401k, maxing that out to the 18.5 that you could do this year as at the time of this recording. Or if you have a 403b or 457 plan, taking advantage of those tax advantage programs, or taking advantage of a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. If you're able to max those out, or even an HSA, another tax advantage opportunity, if you're able to max those out, this is a great way to save on taxes as well as take advantage of the market. And if you've been able to do that over the past 7 to 8 years, you would have built a lot of wealth based on the growth of the market if you were in a general index fund taking advantage of the market. That's number 8.
So the limit for tax deductibility is 18.5.
Right.
But the actual limit, I think, is up around 53,000.
Oh, okay. Can we talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's federal limits, and then there's plan-specific limits.
Okay.
And you have to go talk to your specific plan administrator. So after 18.5, you can put more money into your 401k. However, you're not getting the tax deduction for it now.
Got it.
So you're putting it in after tax, but it can grow tax-free.
Got it. Okay.
Now, beyond that, depending on your company, there is something called in-service withdrawal. And you can do an in-service withdrawal, take your after-tax money out and roll it into a Roth IRA. It's called the Mega Backdoor Roth IRA. And I've linked to it before, and I'll link to it again in the show notes because I think it's Mad Fientist did a great article on this one. And we're doing it for the first time this year that we can actually just crank all of this money. We're above the limit, so we can't put money into a Roth IRA, but we can do it through this program.
Wow.
And so it allows you that backdoor way in.
That's great. Yeah, I've heard about that mega backdoor, and these are the great advanced strategies that you'll find in the depths of the internet, which is great.
Yes. So onward. No, step 9.
Very cool. Yeah. So step 9, and this was just me personally going through this, developing your first source of passive income. And obviously this can happen throughout any of these baby steps, could be early on in the process. But for me, as I got to this point in my life, I said, wow, and I'm completely debt free. I feel like I'm starting at 0 now, building the passive income that I need in my life in order to replace my full-time job if needed, if things weren't going well. And I had the ability to just be okay because I had other money coming in. So passive income sources could be through rental real estate. That's something that Nicole and I are looking into later this year to try to buy our first rental property with cash, or just utilizing a taxable brokerage account and then taking advantage of the dollars that would come through there, or just even developing a small business, maybe a podcast or a blog like Rocky and I are doing here, just having a little bit of extra cash and having some fun with it. And if you can build it in a way where there's some passive income that comes through it, essentially making money while you sleep, that is a great way to build wealth. So I liked that as number 9.
So hang on, because I struggle with the word passive income. One of those is passive income. That's investing in the stock market, because you essentially do sleep all night. In real estate and building this blog and this podcast, it's not exactly passive. You've got to do a ton of work.
Sure.
And that's a thing that people think of it as passive income, and then they end up getting into it, especially with real estate. And then they start realizing that there's work involved, and then they're shocked. And it's like, you know what? And literally this month is kind of a shocker, because I've got 3 tenants leaving all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting them all to go. And now I have to go show places and find 2 tenants and deal with all the turnover of apartments and get painters and cleaners and all of that kind of stuff going. So it's work.
So I take it you don't have a property manager then. That's something that you guys manage personally?
I manage them personally, which is making me think much more about having a property manager. Because then I wouldn't have to worry about it. The problem is the costs involved.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where my struggle has been. I think at some point we'll probably get a property manager. And again, it's because I'm having tenant turnover that I've got a month of work. The rest of the year, I have no work. If something breaks, I just call somebody. It's not work to me. This is the only time where I've kind of got to get a little bit more involved. I don't mind it, so it's fine. And going forward, we'll see what happens. I think the first 2 rentals, I wasn't as smart as to setting up the cash flow properly in the beginning. Now they cash flow and I could pay property management and it would all be fine. But in the beginning, I made mistakes and then I figured it out and I've improved it. So it's good.
That's the best way to roll.
Best way to roll. So step 10.
Step 10, yeah. So step 10, this kind of falls into a lot of conversations you and I have been involved with regard to being financially independent. So once you have enough passive income or any income that's being developed through outside resources outside of a full-time job, then you are in a position to be financially independent. So that would be sort of that peak moment when you've got enough rental properties like you do, Rocky, or you've got enough money in your taxable brokerage or your small business is rocking where you're feeling like, hey, this is something that's manageable. I work a little bit of time, but I'm able to make enough money where my annual expenses are covered. That would be step 10 to me.
This one's a difficult one. And I'll tell you why. When I first started off, when I was young, it's like, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, yeah. That's easy, right? And then life and inflation came along. And somewhere around there, probably the late 90s, I used to listen to a guy on the radio, and he talked about critical mass. And for him, critical mass was $2 million. He pretty much said, if you have $2 million, you have critical mass, you can go do anything you want, basically, and live a decent life. Which, if you have $2 million, 4% withdrawal rate, that's $80,000 a year. You can have a pretty decent life on $80,000 a year. But then inflation came in and this and that. And so while that number was fine for 2018, it's like, I want a little bit bigger of a number. And then with the stock markets where it's at and all-time highs and bond market at all-time highs and still having relatively young kids, it's like, I think I need a little bit bigger of a cushion. And I've had conversations with other people who are even further along than me age-wise, but I think everyone has the same thing. It's like, do I have enough that I can truly walk away? And there's a bit of fear, even when you hit your FI number, of letting go. Yeah. It's like, maybe one more year. And we had Fritz Gilbert on, and he's about like 2 weeks away, I think, from walking away. But it took him, I think, an extra year or 2 to do that. And so that, I think, is letting go, because at that point, you're essentially letting go, unless you're saying to yourself, oh, I'll go back and work, which is cool too. And that's why I like the real estate. And that's why I like this, because it gives me that little bit of cushion that I don't have to worry as much about some of the other things. And some people are totally comfortable letting go. Some are not. I think more apt than not, people struggle with letting go. And if all of your income is coming from a stock market, bond market portfolio, because you're drawing down on principal, I think it sometimes puts fear, am I going to have enough and will it last?
I think if you're letting go to go somewhere else, I think that's okay. Maybe not a full-time job, but at least something that you feel passionate about, then you're not really fully letting go. I mean, you're not going from something to nothing. You're going from something to something else.
That's a different step. Mm-hmm. So that's financial independence, where you have the ability to say no to whatever you want to say no to and yes to whatever you want to say yes to. You're still doing what you want, and you're not worried about how much you're going to make, as long as you've got a little bit coming in and covering it. And absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a different thing, and that's kind of that in-between balance. And I'm trying to convince my wife that we're there. She doesn't. Part of it, the problem is she loves her job. She doesn't like the politics, but she loves her job so much that she doesn't want to leave and go do something else, because then she's like, well, I have to do all this other stuff that's associated with that, and I don't want to do all of that. I just love what I do. And the problem is, because she loves what she does, she's like, you can't retire. I'm working. I keep going, you're 5 years younger than me. You got to work 5 years longer. So I think sometime in the not too distant future, as we've got our kids settled into college and we know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Our original set date was when my son graduated college. That's FI, just because they're done. Yeah, and we know that we'll have more than enough at that point. And I think that's also part of it, is neither of us, we love what we do, so it's not like I hate getting up in the morning. If I did, I would change everything. I'd be FI now and I'd be gone.
Yeah, if you both like your careers or your jobs, it's good to have financial independence, but you don't need to retire early.
I think that's kind of where we're at. It's good, and we're enjoying it.
That's good.
So I have a different last baby step, and it's the one that I've kind of been working on. And that is to overcome yourself, find peace and happiness, and be clear on your purpose and meaning, and be content. Like, whatever happens, just be content in that moment and not let it disturb you. I think when you have financial independence, you can do that. So, like, at this point, I have 3 renters leaving. I'm like, okay, all right, so there's expenses, there's this, there's that. It's his life. Like, if the AC goes out, okay, it's annoying, but it's fine. And it's just kind of finding that inner peace to be happy with whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent. That's one of the things I probably could have been working on a lot earlier. I'm getting there. It takes a while.
Outside of the financial side of things, what else are you doing to help you get there, wellness-wise or anything? What else are you doing to get that?
Oh, there's a ton of things. So I think it's morning routines, adding in meditation. I think part of that is also physical fitness. So being in good physical shape. Some of the other things I think we do mentally, like I've been to see Tony Robbins. So that's a great thing of just being clear. I have a written life plan now. I've got clear purpose. I know what I'm doing. It's also being at peace to ignore other people. Even if someone says something derogatory, to not be a reflection on you. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. You release work. I release my podcast. When I started this, I was like, I'm going to release this podcast. If no one listens, no one listens, but I'm enjoying it. So I'm just going to go do it. So being able to be comfortable kind of in your own skin and releasing your stuff and not working and worrying about it. I think a lot of that is where the mindset comes in. And that's why I focus a lot on mindset. We all have these voices in our head that are designed to save us, right? Danger, danger, danger and everything. It's just learning to quiet down those voices in our head and saying, no, there is no danger. Everything is okay. It's all right they didn't return my email. It's all right they don't want to do business with me. It's all right. All of these different kinds of things.
I think that's great. I love Tony Robbins. He's very motivating, not only in his story about where he's come from, but I feel like every time I listen to him, I come away with something new that really personally affects me. It's great.
One of the things with him is it is about giving back. It's about letting go of status, right? You don't need things and stuff or status symbols anymore. It's being able to love. It's just kind of being at peace with yourself. And that's what I think he talks about.
Yeah, he's big on gratitude too, which is something I'm always trying to work on. And That can be a daily practice for sure.
And that is probably the word. So if you looked at this last step and what I've just said, that can all be summed up in that one word, gratitude. Like, can you be grateful for everything in the moment, good or bad?
Absolutely. I love that. Let's replace it for number 10.
We have number money, 11.
Exactly. Number 11.
Number 11.
Who needs 10 steps?
11th step. Well, you got to keep going, right? You need that next step.
Absolutely. That's what life's all about, the next step.
And that's what constant improvement's about. And that's what constantly growing is about. And I think all of those things kind of come together.
Yeah, when you can balance constant improvement and the next step with being content, maybe that's when you've hit it.
Absolutely. So you are at Marriage, Kids, and Money. And what are your goals for that? What is that all about?
Yeah, so just a couple years ago, I wanted to do something to flex my creative muscle, entrepreneurial muscle, just do something a little different. I've always been the 9-to-5 working guy, and I thought, well, I'm really into podcasts, and I feel like I've got something to say, and I really want to learn from other people who are building wealth for their families. So I wanted to develop this blog and podcast to have some great conversations with people like yourself, Rocky, and learn from them so I can become a better dad, a better husband, and grow legacy wealth for my family. So I started that podcast and blog about almost 2 years ago now, and it's been great. I've done almost 85 shows every week for the past 85 weeks and have had some incredible conversations with self-made millionaires, personal finance experts, and financially independent rock stars. And I've just learned a ton, and I've been able to share a little bit too about our journey in eliminating our debt and some great conversations and steps that Nicole and I have taken to grow a great marriage together. So it's been great, and I hope that over time it turns into a small business that I can use as a nice passive income source. Right now, it's a fun hobby with a little bit of change, we'll say.
For tax purposes, this is a business.
Exactly. This is a business. Absolutely. So it's great. I'm really enjoying it. I've connected with some great people and now some businesses that are interested in partnering with me on the sponsorship side. So things are great. I really like it a lot.
Well, that's cool. And what are some of the things that you've learned from all of these conversations?
Oh, wow. Well, personally, I didn't realize the power of diversifying your income. And that was a big thing that I learned over the past couple of years. I thought, hey, you just work hard, you save a lot, and that'll help you build wealth. But really, diversifying your income, just like diversifying your portfolio, is just as important. So I've been working on that and personally working on that. And that was sort of a nice epiphany for me. And also connecting with individuals on this whole financial independence story. I really didn't even know financial independence was a thing a couple of years ago. And learning more about that, what people are able to do when they're financially independent, the time freedom they're able to have, the ability to pursue all of the interests that they have, spend more time with their families, it's motivated me to do the same.
And that's cool because it gave you the push to step up. I believe we have 7 different streams of income.
And what are those?
So there's 2 W-2 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
There's the portfolio income, which is, at this point, because of its growth, it's massive. There's real estate rental income. There is real estate flip income. So we flip houses as well. There is the podcasting coaching income.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have I'm an enrolled agent, so I have a side business in tax and bookkeeping.
Oh, great.
My wife is a CPA, so that's that's been there as a placeholder business, literally for the purpose of, should she retire or should somebody kick her out? The shell is there, and you can fire it up and go. You don't have to think, oh, what do I need to do? It's, hey, we're here, the process is here, and now it's just a matter of pouring the fuel in and letting it rip. So they've all kind of been there for different lengths of time and different things. And actually, when you look at most millionaires and you look at their streams of income, most of them have multiple streams of income.
Yeah, what I like about that conversation is it just makes you probably, to the point of being content, probably makes you less stressed knowing that you have a balance of 7 different spots to get your income, just in case one of them doesn't work out. It makes you feel less stressed, and it probably makes you feel a little bit more confident walking around.
Yeah, at this point, if both of us lost our jobs, it wouldn't matter. Like,
Right.
Okay, whatever. Instead of me having to make a choice, someone else had made a choice for me, and then we just have to just figure out what we want to do next and put full force in that, and it would be fine. I'd be content. So
There you go.
it's all
That's
good.
an incredible position of strength. That's great.
Yes. I think people think of jobs as that's what we were taught, right? It's the safe, secure way. But the reality of it is if you have a job, your job is in someone else's hands. When I grew up, companies kept you around forever. Today, companies fire people left and right for no reason. It has nothing. You could be the smartest, best person in there. They're changing business plans. They're doing something. They got acquired. They're no longer relevant because technology took them out. Your job disappears. And so that's why you have to keep growing and making sure that you're constantly relevant in the business world.
Or you're not the flavor of the week anymore. For some time, you are producing and hustling, and for some reason you have a bad year or a bad day, it could be over.
People always think that if I were going to lose my job, it was because of something I did. And I think today's world, it doesn't matter what you do. The decisions are arbitrary. They don't look at you as a person. You're just a line item on a budget sheet somewhere in most companies. Even if you're at the top levels. I mean, companies look at the CEO and go, you missed 2 quarters. Bye. Have a nice day. So even the guy at the top is replaceable.
Yeah, you want to have that control, especially when it comes to taking care of your family. I know that's something I constantly think about quite a bit.
Absolutely. When you have control, then you can find peace and you can be content. Is there anything that we should have talked about today that we haven't covered, or is there anything that I should have asked you about that I haven't asked you about?
I think we covered a lot today. We covered marriage, we covered kids, and we covered a lot about money. And that's what I like.
That was the theme for today, right? Marriage, kids, and money. That's your expertise, right?
That is.
And that's one of the things. We haven't said this. You have to be balanced. You have to look at things holistically. Because if your job is pulling you away for 60 hours, that's going to screw up your marriage and your kids and eventually your money.
Absolutely.
Or if you're not spending the time having the conversations with your wife, then your money would have probably not been as phenomenal as it is. And the relationship you have with your kids, she wouldn't have been able to stay home. So all these pieces are interconnected. You can't look at one piece by itself. You have to see how they all fit together. And for everybody, they fit together differently. So don't pick someone else's plan. Create your little puzzle pieces and figure out how they work for you and your goals and your desires. And it sounds like you've done that. You have the conversations between the two of you about how to do that.
Yeah, and to your point on those 3 elements, I've structured the show purposely for that reason. Marriage is first, because if you don't have a strong marriage and you don't have those great conversations, then your relationship with your kids, being a parent, is going to fall apart. You got to put your marriage oxygen mask on first, or you're not really going to be the best parent you can be, and you're definitely not going to be able to handle your money well if you are constantly at each other's throats or having money fights. So marriage needs to be first, and letting your kids know that is important too. I mean, a lot of parents surround themselves with their kids, or they make their kids their world, and we're trying to let our kids understand that our marriage has to come first, because without a solid marriage, it's going to affect our relationship with them. So that's something we're constantly working on as well.
Very cool. So do you have, based on our conversation today, what kind of an action step do you think you could share with the audience, something they could do over the next week or 2?
We talked a lot about the marriage dynamic, and I think that that's something that no matter what age you are or where you are in your life, I think people can always improve the relationship that they have with their spouse. I think setting aside time to have some important conversations about what your marriage life plan is. We talked about Tony Robbins and setting up this life plan, right? What could you do to sit down with your spouse and then talk about what kind of marriage you want to have? What kind of relationship you want to define you? What is this marriage going to be? And if that needs to happen separately, about what your life plan is versus your spouse, and then merging those two together and finding out where you find some synergies, I think that could spark a really great date night. Having those types of conversations, moving aside the typical, hey, how was your day? And then really getting down to what your marriage life plan is. I think that would be a really great date. So I'll challenge everybody to do that.
And a bottle of wine won't hurt.
Absolutely. You know what? It might even make the plan better.
I think that is a perfect action step for them. So if people would like to find you and connect, where is the best place for them to find you?
If you go to marriagekidsandmoney.com, that is a great place to connect. And if you are into podcasts, like I know you all are, check out the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast on any major podcast player.
Cool. And I encourage the listeners to do that. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy. This was an awesome conversation today.
Thanks so much, Rocky.
Clearly, being intentional and focused creates great results. Imagine being debt-free and owning your home free and clear at 36. That provides an amazing amount of cash flow to enjoy life, go on great trips, and live on your terms. I applaud Andy for what he has done. Now that you know this is possible, what are you going to do differently to create your life of abundance and gratitude? In the next 2 weeks, we're going to meet 2 more couples who have achieved financial success and learn about their journeys. Today's action step: take the time to have the conversation with your spouse, significant other, about creating the life of your dreams. Remember to listen to them and their dreams. Is there someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today? Please share, as it helps you to build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know. They'll appreciate you for it. The obvious person to share this with is your spouse, so you can start that conversation. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a chat to see if we're a good fit. You can reach me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.